Hey guys, it's Kevin and my review for the first season of the new Amazon show, The Boys. And what The Boys is essentially about is basically we center on this world in which superpowered individuals are very much a thing, but they're in a very realistic setting, and because of that, these superheroes are not necessarily good. They have become very corrupted of their power and things like that, and so because of this happening, there is this group that is formed known as The Boys. They are these vigilantes who, all of them have been personally wronged by the Supes, and they try to bring them down, and basically the rest of the show is seeing them go about their mission, seeing if they can take them down, but also exploring all sides of this conflict overall, why the Supes are the way they are, how the Boys have been affected, and really just getting to that crescendo when these two sides do eventually converge, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, The Boys overall, I was very, very excited for this show. If you guys saw my top 10 anticipated video I did of all the summer shows, this was very high on the list for sure, and I mean, I was hyped out of my mind for the show. Just the concept overall of placing superheroes in a realistic setting and what would happen if we actually had superheroes in the real world, I think is a really cool idea. There's so much you can do that, but also having this group of vigilantes in there, I was really hoping the show would deliver. I also love what Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg have been able to do TV-wise recently. You know, I liked Preacher for the first season at least. The second season I didn't really like as much, and I've heard it has gotten better since. I've just hadn't had any real motivation to catch up, but knowing what they've been able to do, I was excited to see what they were really going to do here, and I have to say, The Boys delivered on pretty much all fronts for me. I absolutely adore this show. This is such a highly inventive and really refreshing take on the superhero genre overall, but we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And there are a lot of things that really do make the show as great as it is, but the cast is absolutely one of them. Everyone here really does stick out. However, the big standout, without a doubt, in this first season has to be that of Karl Urban as a character of Billy Butcher, who I thought was so fantastic here. He is, in fact, the leader of the Boys, but he also has been very personally affected by what the Supes has done. As a result, it has caused him to very vehemently hate them, and Urban does a really great job showing that urgency that Butcher has. No matter what he does, he will make sure that he goes after them. He will make sure that this gets done, and he also makes Butcher a very sympathetic character as well. I feel like this is a character that could have been really annoying, but because of the pathos that Urban really puts into the role, he really makes you care and really kind of identify with this character. He does a really great job here overall. I very much loved him in the show. I've always really liked Karl Urban as an actor, but I think this is easily the strongest performance I've seen from him, and I absolutely love what he did here. He very much carries the show, and I think definitely is going to be one of the major takeaways for anyone that watches the show for sure. Another big standout, though, for me was Jack McQuaid as the character of Huey, who I really did love. This is a guy who's he's your average Joe, you know, he has this whole situation come up, he witnesses a tragedy happen, and pretty much since then, he's just pulled into the Boys, and you kind of feel like you're with Huey, where on one hand, yes, you want to go after the Supes for what they've done to him, but on the other hand, you can kind of understand them, and you don't really know if you want to be with someone like the Boys who are just torturing them constantly, and I thought he did a really great job just showing how conflicted he is and things like that, and I just really loved him in this role. He had a lot of funny lines for sure, and it's especially his chemistry with Karl Urban that really does stick out here. These two work very well together. All of the Boys, I must say, work very well here. I really did like all of them as the series goes on, and I thought they all had such great chemistry here. And then the Supes as well are also very well casted. Erin Moriarty, for me, definitely was the big standout, though. I really liked her as a character of Starlight. She's easily the most compassionate of all of them, and I don't want to get into that too much, but I thought she did a really great job. Antony Starr, though, holy shit, this guy. I mean, there's been villains that, you know, in superhero movies that are really bad. Nothing compares to Homelander here. I mean, this guy is the worst of the worst, and He does a really great job in this role, and, you know, you really do fear him, but you also just really detest this guy, and Starr is just fantastic here. I love what he did here. I really loved Dominique McElligot in here. I thought she did a really great job. Elisabeth Shue as well gives a really great supporting performance. Everyone else here is really great too. I mean, Jessie T. Usher I really like. Chace Crawford is probably the best I've ever seen him. Everyone really does do a fantastic job. Everyone has at least one standout moment in this season, and I really did come to love pretty much everyone here. But now I have to get into the directing and the writing here, which is easily the best thing about this entire show. I mean, the directing here just feels so well realized in that sense. It definitely has this very grounded feel to it where if this situation were to happen, you know, if superheroes were to come into the real world, this is most likely how it would play out. As scary as that is, you know, you want things to be like in Avengers where everyone are just these good guys. That's not very realistic. That's not really what would end up happening, and it works so well in this series, and that's married so well with the comedy of it all. The show doesn't take itself too seriously. It knows when to have a lot of fun and really just play up on some of those really ridiculous tropes in superheroes, and it does a really great job with that for sure. But again, the show knows when to take itself seriously and when not to, and when it takes itself seriously, my god, does it work as well. I mean, there are so many just crazy moments in this series, some that definitely had my jaw on the floor for sure, and I think they did some real, I think the directing here was so spot on in terms of that. It's absolutely the right tone, and I think the show did a really great job with that. It definitely does get darker as it goes on. It starts off and it definitely can be a lot of fun, but it's definitely not fun all the way through. Like, it definitely does have that, like I said, that nice blend that I think was paired perfectly here for sure. The writing here, though, again, is just so great for the show, because what's really great is just how character-driven this entire series really is. The whole show really is that way, and that's one of the reasons why I really do love it as much as I do. We really do get a glimpse into who all of these characters are, what they're really fighting for, and I think they do a really great job of that, especially when it comes to the boys. Like I said, they really do a great job of getting into all of their heads and really getting us to understand who they are. And this is one of those shows where this doesn't happen a lot, but my favorite character kept changing throughout the entire show. It started off, and it was actually one of the soups that was one of my favorites, and that was Annie, this character that all her life she's wanted to be a soup. It's something that she's dreamed of, and now she finally gets to do it. You know, she's this superhero known as Starlight. Everything seems to be going great, and then once she's pulled in, she starts to see that it isn't all it's cracked up to be. There are a lot of very disturbing things that are going on. I mean, pretty much right when she gets there, the way she's greeted, yeah, she knows that this is not that great of a thing to do. This is not all that she's ever wanted. It really gets her to start reconsidering things, and I really liked her character quite a bit, and I really like where she ends up going, just how even though she has to maintain that superhero status, a lot of what she's doing and a lot of the things that, you know, the Seven is doing, she does not really support. She thinks that they're definitely out of line. She thinks there's a lot of things that need to be reevaluated, and you really are on board with her character. But then Huey became my favorite. Huey is this guy who, like I said, kind of is the main character this season, although there really isn't one. He's the person that has really pulled into this situation very early on. Something does end up happening to him that gets him pulled into the boys, and his confliction, like I said, is something that you really do feel, and I really did find myself identifying with this character. But then, in the back half of the season, they really start to flesh out the character of Billy Butcher more. Someone who, in the beginning of the series, you really do see him as like this asshole who's just calling all the shots. Anyone else that, you know, deviates from his plans, he has a problem with, and you're like, why is he acting this way? Why does he have this seething hatred for superheroes? And you find out what it is in that back half, and after that, I'm like, all right, now he's my favorite character. So it's one of those shows where so many characters are so well written that you'll find yourself just flip-flopping between who actually is your favorite. And I think they do an excellent job with that here. And that's one of the things I really do adore about the show, is just how well written all these characters are. And even characters like, say, Homelander, someone who is so despicable and does so many acts that are just terrible to witness, you definitely do see the kind of character he is. This is not someone who is your typical superhero. A lot of the things that you would expect him to do, he absolutely doesn't. It's all for show, and I think that they did a really great job with just showing that, and that's one of the things the show does a really great job with, is just the realisticness of it all. You know, realistically, a lot of these superheroes, they're not gonna be these great people. A lot of them feel very corrupted by their power, and that causes them to do things that you see superheroes do, but they're not doing things like saving people and, you know, putting out fire. They're not doing that because of the fact that they're just doing good deeds. No, they're doing it to heighten their popularity, or they're doing it because they want to make themselves look good, or they're doing it as a publicity stunt. You know, it's kind of like politics in that way, and that I also found highly interesting about the show. We really do get deep into who all of these characters are, how they've been affected by this, and I think they did some excellent work there for sure. And that really leads to one of the best pairings of the whole show, which is the relationship between the character of Huey and Annie. These two, again, are on polar opposites throughout the entire show. Annie's with the Supes, Huey is with the boys, and while you really are entertained by this relationship and seeing the similarities that they all have, you're waiting for that to explode. You're waiting for things to just deteriorate there, and I think they did a really great job with writing them as well. And when it comes to the boys, I mean, holy shit, they do some really excellent work with these characters. You really find yourself liking them, but you also do find some times where you're like, all right, you guys are going a little too far. This is a little unnecessarily cruel. And I thought that's when you know you're dealing with some great writing here, when you're even kind of conflicted with how you should feel with the heroes of the show. Like, because sometimes, yes, they are making the right call, but sometimes you feel they're going a little bit too far, and they're just doing it because of revenge. And I really liked the dilemma that they're facing there, especially for Huey. You know, he's facing this dilemma where it's like, okay, yes, I am getting that justice for what's happened to me, but at the same time, there's a fine line between getting justice and then, you know, getting justice and then trying to just mercifully torture these Supes, which is almost worse than what they're doing, which I think they did a really great job with examining that for sure. And that group is not as solid as they may appear to be. There's a lot of cracks in that foundation. The character of Frenchie, for example, this is a guy who's always acting out. He's always doing things differently from Billy's plan, and this causes a lot of friction there. Or you have someone like Mother's Milk, someone who, even though he is with the boys, he keeps trying to get away. He keeps promising his wife and his kids that, like, this is the last time I'm going to do this, but he keeps getting roped back into it. So, really, all of these guys are just so well written. They do a really great job with that. And the show explores some topics of like greed and revenge just so well, and that's one of the things I really did adore about the show for sure. And all the twists that this show ends up taking were not things that I was expecting at all, particularly places they went in the back half of the season. I was not expecting them to go where they did, but it definitely goes into some crazy places, and I definitely really appreciate that for sure. I think the writing was just so solid there. Like I said, the show definitely is a lot of fun. There's a lot of moments where, you know, there's a great gag, especially, and I think it's like the 5th or 6th episode. It's this like reality series that all the superheroes are a part of, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's really kind of lampooning at what we expect superheroes to be like versus what they actually are like, and I really appreciate that for sure. And I think it's just, again, the writing is just so well written here. They know exactly what kind of show they're writing, and I think they did some really great stuff there for sure. And even characters like, say, A-Train, for example. I mean, this is someone who, he does a lot of things that, you know, very much are terrible, and we should hate him for it, but they also get us to really understand where he's coming from. You know, he's trying to support, he's trying to support his girlfriend and things like that, and he wants to be known as, like, the fastest man alive, and he wants to keep that title for as long as possible, and they do a really good job with that. Or what they do the character of Queen Maeve, someone who, yes, she is the ex-girlfriend of she is the ex-girlfriend, of course, of Homelander, but at the same time, she knows what he's capable of. She isn't really into this anymore. She's kind of annoyed by what's going on. You've seen how much she's been through, and they do a really great job with that. So really, all of these characters just feel so well fleshed out. There really isn't a single, for the most part, there isn't a character this season that I don't think is fleshed out. I think they all do give them something, and I very much do appreciate that for sure. Like I said, the dialogue in the show is just so great. The twist that the show takes is great. And there's even a really nice dosage of humor, especially when it comes to the soups. They really do play up on a lot of tropes we expect to see within this genre, particularly one involving this gag that they do with this reality show that they're on. Absolutely hilarious, and I loved what they did there. Stuff like that I thought was very funny for sure, and just the irony of it all, where, like, you're expecting to see these superheroes, do really heroic things, and then they're really not. I think they did a really great job with that for sure. But the other thing that is so strong about the show is really the world building of it all. I think they do an excellent job with this because, sure, you look at this and the first thing that's going to come to mind is Kick-Ass. We've seen Kick-Ass before, these realistic superheroes. The difference is these guys actually do have superpowers. These guys actually are superhumans. They are able to do things, such as, be really strong or turn invisible or, shoot these rays out of their eyes. Like, they have these powers, but it also feels very grounded in that way. Like I said, if superheroes were to be on Earth, if they were a real thing, I feel like this is very much how it would play out. And because of how strong that world building is, you kind of are conflicted like Huey, where on one side, you don't know if you'd really believe, like, if these really were the heroes are, or would there be reasonable doubt? Would you question, like, okay, well, who really are these guys? Are they really as good as they say they are? And would you possibly end up joining the boys? And I think this show provokes a lot of interesting questions when it comes to that stuff. And not many superhero shows are able to do that. A lot of superhero shows, they really play the same beats over and over again, but this is one of those shows where it just feels so much more organic that you find yourself very compelled. You find yourself really questioning, like, where you really stand on this side of things, and I think they do a really great job with that here for sure. So yeah, I think the writing is pretty fantastic here. The cinematography is very good in the show because, yes, it definitely does have the feel at points of a superhero. And, it definitely feels like a superhero series at points. It's very bright and colorful. However, when we're with the boys, it is a much darker contrast, and it never feels like they're trying to be too gritty. It's just a really nice contrast, and I think they do some really cool stuff there for sure. You'll notice any scene with the boys and their hideout, it's significantly darker than any scene with the Soups, and I think it was just a really cool idea of what they were trying to do there and how they were, like, kind of categorizing it. I really did like the cinematography there, and the action sequences as well are really great in this show. There's one, not really an action sequence, but there's one scene in the 4th episode. Holy shit, I was on the edge of my seat. It was just so nerve-wracking to watch, and honestly, I have to say, it was more intense than the majority of the blockbusters I saw this summer. I mean, the whole show overall is, like, closer to what I wanted to see this summer, and I think they did a really great job with that for sure. I really love the cinematography here. The score here is definitely really great. And the editing, I think the show is extremely well paced. They really did make the most out of their 8-episode length. You would think maybe that's not enough, but they really are able to tell this story in a very, it really does feel as fleshed out as possible in 8 episodes. And I always say, like, you don't need like 10 to 13 episodes to tell a story. You need the amount of episodes that you need for your show. And this show very well recognizes that. I feel like if they had any more, it would have very much dragged on. So I'm really glad they did have that shorter episode length, and I think they did some really good stuff there. So obviously I'm gushing about the show, I'm really loving it. I do have one flaw though, as well written as all these characters are. There is one that I just don't think the show knew what to do with, and that's the character of the Deep. Without spoiling anything, in the first episode of the show, he does something pretty much unforgivable. It's going to make you hate him instantly. And it's just as bad as, say, like what Homelander's doing. The difference is, while Homelander's a character that you know is very despicable, and he's doing all of these terrible things, and you really do see where he's coming from in that way, and you get a good understanding of, like, why he is the way he is. The Deep, after he commits this one act, the show after that has no idea what to do with him. And look, I really like Chace Crawford, and I like what they did with this character, but really thinking about it, I had a very hard time, like, figuring out what his arc really was. They do get into how he is not very much taken seriously because of his gills and things like that, and they do some cool stuff there, but aside from that, I didn't really feel like we got enough with this character, and especially the way they left things off. I just don't really know where the Deep is going as a character, and it's the only, really just thinking about the season, again, not a badly written character or anything, but really just thinking about it, it's the only character where I didn't feel very satisfied. I didn't feel like they had a clear direction where I was like, oh, that's what they're trying to do. I really had a hard time figuring it out. It honestly kind of felt like a bait and switch where at one moment he was this way, and at the other moment he was another way. Other than that, I think the show is absolutely fantastic, and I really can't recommend enough. But now I am going to get into spoilers because there's a lot to talk about that goes on with the show for sure. So if you have not seen The Boys, do not watch the rest of this review. I have a lot to really discuss here. So, of course, I'm going to talk about some brief things that I decided to withhold from revealing in this review, mainly because I just thought that going into it not knowing it is going to make it that much more shocking. For example, I did not know that Huey's girlfriend dies within the first few minutes of the show. And yeah, it's pretty crushing. It definitely really does hit you. You have this hatred towards A-Train. Even though you don't even know who A-Train is, you just absolutely hate what it's done to Huey. Him and his girlfriend, they're just having this conversation, and then all of a sudden, about Billy Joel and things like that, and how much he isn't really a fan of him, and then A-Train just comes bursting through and just kills her, and it's like I said, it's very hard to watch, but I think the show did a really great job at showing that feud between A-Train and Huey. It had been brewing up for a very long time, and once A-Train eventually got to, Huey and things like that, I like the moment where, Starlight talks about how this is never going to end. He's just going to continue wanting to get his vengeance on Huey. He's not going to rest until he really does get it. But you also do understand where A-Train is coming from. He thinks that Huey killed his girlfriend at first, and he kind of blames Huey for it, when in reality, he's the one who did it. And he is using Huey as a way to mask, what he's really done, and a way to keep himself popular in that sense. But you can see that's already starting to wane. I mean, there's that scene with, like, the train and things like that, so, despite the fact that he obviously, wants to keep up that popularity, it's slowly starting to decrease, and that's when we get one of the best reveals in the entire show, that the serum, that the superpowers that they have, they're not born with them. And that's something else that Annie was told from a young age. No, this is all like a steroid. It's this drug that they're taking, and basically because of that, their entire corporation is now being shut down, which I think is a really interesting idea. I'm very excited to see where they go with that for sure, especially knowing that there's a terrorist now that's a possible superhero. I'm excited to get more into that character, what he's all about. We really don't know too much of, and that's something I'm very interested in getting into for sure, and I think they did a really good job with building that. And also the relation between Annie and Huey. I mean, again, like I said, you knew eventually this was going to crumble. You knew at some point this was all going to fall apart because of what Huey was doing, because of how he was so toxic for Annie. But I like the way things played out here. I was really worried that we were going to end the season with Annie turning into a villain, with her just being heartbroken by what Huey did and being corrupted by Homelander and deciding to go full villain. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. Instead, she's trying to be a real hero. She's trying to live up to that, even though that's not at all what the Seven is made of. I mean, what the Seven is made up of are very corrupted individuals who have grown, who have really taken advantage of their powers, and they've become these really disgusting, vile human beings. And Annie is not down for that. She does not want to become like that. So she wants to become a legitimate hero. She wants to save people. She wants to do good things. And I like that she's headed in that direction. Do I eventually think she could possibly become a member of the boys? I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, Huey thinks that that's a reality, but it also seems a little too easy. It seems like that's a path that she could go on for sure, but it also just seems like it's not a very realistic one in that sense, and I'm excited to see where they do go with this, because obviously, Huey wants to be with Annie. We know these two have this, Annie cares about Huey and things like that. She even talks about how, he was the first guy that was real with her and the first guy that was honest with her. And she also feels like she can be herself around him. One of my favorite scenes in the whole season with that is when she's at that press conference and she's talking about how, like, she's a virgin and she was saved by Jesus. But then she just strips it all away and says, no, this is not who I am. I am not going to live in this fantasy. So right away, she is deviating from what, like, Homelander and a bunch of them are doing. She's not going to put on this facade that, like, everything's great. She wants to be real with them, and I like where Annie is really heading as that character. I'm excited to see what they really do with her, because, of course, at the moment, A-Train is still in a coma, but she has to try to hold those cops off as much as she possibly can, so I'm really not sure where that's going to go. I guess we'll have to see. But, of course, the big thing to talk about is everything going on with Billy. Like I said, the first half of the season, there's something going on. He has this just extreme hatred for Soups. Not just like everyone else does. Like, everyone else, they definitely are for it, but any time that they do something that is even the least bit compassionate to the Soups, Billy's like, nope, they're all the same. You cannot do that, and you just can't trust any of them. And you're wondering, okay, what is really setting this guy off? Why does he have this hatred? Why does he go as far as literally almost killing Annie? Like, he literally shoots her, even though Huey's telling her, like, no, she's not like that. She's actually good. Billy doesn't buy it, and then that revelation comes where we realize that his wife was, in fact, we think, raped by Homelander, and Billy was someone who, his wife admired Homelander, and Billy thought of the superheroes as we do, as nothing but purely good. So just hearing the fact that Homelander might be involved, that really did set him off, and ever since then, he's had this vendetta against him. And similar to Huey and A-Train, you're waiting for him to confront Homelander, but the way things played out here is not at all what you would expect. I was expecting for Billy to die or something like that, but no. What happens instead is that we find out that Stillwell, Elisabeth Shue's character, she actually is Homelander's weakness in that way. So Homelander kills her, realizing that he needs to get rid of his weakness, because, all of them do have that one weakness, and Stillwell is his. He kills her, and then he ends up knocking Billy out, and we find out his wife did disappear, but she's very much alive, and they actually do have a child together. So she's actually been hiding in secret this entire time, and I feel like this is something we should have seen coming. We get this mention of, like, Homelander's child, and we're like, what's he talking about? Like, who is this child? But now we realize what's really going on. The real question is, did Billy's wife really get raped, or was this deliberate? Was this something that she wanted? I mean, we're not entirely sure. All we know is that they had this interaction, and she disappeared shortly after, and Billy, up to that point, thought that she was dead, like Homelander killed her or something like that, but I don't think that's where this is going at all. I think Homelander has a much more devious plan in play, and I really don't know where things are headed for Season 2, and it's rare that I can say that with a show, but really, the way things ended, I don't know where they're heading here, and I'm very excited to see what they end up doing, especially now that the boys are pretty much fugitives. I mean, everyone's going to be on their tail now, knowing what they're doing, especially seeing the footage of Billy killing Annie. Again, they don't know what these superheroes are truly capable of. Of course, Annie is the purest of them all besides Maeve, who is really the only other person that has even the littlest, just an ounce of sympathy for anyone. But I'm excited to get into that relation more as well, because, Maeve was the one who was telling Annie, like, you can't let this hurt you. Like, this is your weakness. You cannot let other people get the best of you. You have to try to get away from this. And Annie wasn't going to do that. And honestly, Maeve was kind of right. This very much did hurt Annie, but it's also made her realize that she wants to be that hero, and I'm excited to see where they do go with that. I'm excited to see Huey and the boys, because obviously Huey is the leader now. Billy's going to be MIA throughout most of the season, I'm assuming. I mean, maybe not. Maybe this will be like a 1 or 2 episode thing, and then he's back, but Huey is really the one leading things now, and you can also see that Mother's Milk and Frenchie are far more on board with that, because they don't want to have to listen to Billy's demands anymore. They want to do what they want to do, and Huey's someone who's far more understanding than that, and I'm excited to see really where that's going to go, but especially, like I said, this whole thing with Billy and Homelander, I have no idea where they're going to take that. I think there are so many places they can go with that storyline for sure, and really, with a world like this, with the world building, there's so many infinite possibilities, and I'm just really excited to see what they end up doing here. So overall, guys, The Boys was pretty much everything I wanted it to be. It is an highly entertaining and very inventive show. It does an excellent job of taking the tropes of superheroes, but also placing them in a very realistic setting. It really does a great job of showing the gray areas of all of these characters, how none of these superheroes are truly perfect. I think they do an excellent job with that, but also fleshing out the boys, Billy and Huey especially, very well-written characters. I'm very excited to see where they do go with them in season 2 for sure. It's very well stylized. It has some awesome action, some really hilarious moments for sure. Very well acted, some excellent writing. It just is really everything that you do want it to be. This is a show that I do not think we have enough of. I think this is one of those shows that we just don't see a lot. There's, especially like I said, considering how oversaturated of a genre this really is, it's really refreshing to see a take like this, something that is so much more realistic, and there are so many more consequences, and there are things that are happening that feels like this could very much happen in a realistic setting, and I think they do such an excellent job with that. It really does make for one of my favorite shows of the entire year, and I'm definitely going to give The Boys season 1 overall an A. So overall, guys, in my review of The Boys, most guys saw this season overall, left your thoughts in it. I know it took me a very long time to finally get to this season, but I was very excited to watch it. I knew I could not, I could not do a complete top 10 summer shows list without watching the show, but also stay tuned, guys, because I have a lot more TV reviews coming this week for sure. I do plan to get that list out at the end of the week, hopefully, so definitely look forward to that. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this season overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.